7 years ago, a small group of humans called conduits emerged, each with the ability to manipulate and even weaponize a unique form of matter. The Department of Unified Protection was formed to hunt down and indefinitely detain all conduits, reclassified as bioterrorists, to protect the population. It's now believed that all bioterrorists have been successfully captured and locked away. As a result, the Department of Unified Protection is being phased out, with the military assuming oversight of all imprisoned bioterrorists. Today, the first military transport of bioterrorists leaves Dupe, Department of Unified Protection, detention facility at Curdon K Station, heading for an army prison upstate Washington. It will never arrive.
Basically, that's the whole premise of the game, and the people that happen to encounter the conduits discover that he has been a conduit this whole time. The protagonist's power is to mimic other powers by touching another conduit's hand, not only taking their powers but seeing their memories in the process. Think of this like Peter Petrelli from the hit TV series Heroes. And not only does this bring a new dynamic to the gameplay, but adds a level of strategy since the controlled character cannot pick up weapons. The top left corner reflects famous or infamous reputations in the open world. Blue represents the heroic actions, and red is the anti-heroic actions. The bar underneath that reflects the dominant reputation solely controlled by the karmic actions performed, and once filled will allow the player to perform their special based on what form of matter is being controlled at the time. The two powers I'll be using is Neon and Smoke, with Smoke having a special called Orbital Drop, and Neon having something called Radiant Sweep, each being useful in their own ways. Radiant Sweep is more ideal on taking out enemies all around the player, while the Orbital Drop is more ideal on destroying anything nearby the player. The bottom left corner with the icons above the bar displays how much of the heavy attacks the player has left and how much of the player can have in one full drain or charge. The bar below the icon displays how much of the player's main attack is left before the player is pretty much left with melee and traversal techniques that differ with each power. The bottom right shows the map with various locations to events or items that the player can collect that adds value for the player even after beating the main story. Not seen here at the moment, but underneath the map displays the current objective, and above the map displays the current location. Powers have 5 categories: main, heavy, special, drain, and traversal. Even though melee is neutral, the styles of hand-to-hand combat changes with each power currently used. The player is able to upgrade each unique power by expanding on any of the 5 categories, and draining charges the player's power, regenerating health instantly if not disturbed. 2 conditions must be met in order to upgrade: finding shards and meeting a good or evil karmic level to unlock enhanced abilities. Lastly, there's karmic streaks. Depending on the player's good or evil reputation, this will result in how the player charges the karmic streaks. The game is broken up with investigations, tagging or graffiti, and or looking for visual cues to meet objectives. This is where the game gives the player too much guidance, because during these investigations, the player can only take out the camera in certain spots, instead of the radiance indicating on the map. Looking for visual cues in the environment, the game will help the player navigate to the last clue, found if lost, which isn't a bad design. The major downfall about objectives that appear under the map, the player will be given solutions to mini bosses, and the odd thing is that this won't be like this for every mini boss battle. If the player is required to do something besides a direct attack to the current mini boss, the player is given solutions when prompts and bars on screen give more than enough hints for the player to figure out on their own. A way around this is that the player can turn off the hub altogether, but the player shouldn't have to do that in order to make the game challenging. So technically speaking, it's like giving an exploit to the player that eliminates what little mental challenges this game has to offer. Missions generally have a choice based on the color displayed on the map and the mission descriptions when the player is at the mission location. A mission might be kill protesters that hate conduits, or help another conduit not use their powers to overcome non-conduits in non-violent ways, usually in the form of exposing a person, letting the truth out of an individual. Playing as a criminal, the player can use specials a lot faster because the player doesn't have to worry about killing anyone, while being a hero, taking out criminals doesn't always give players heroic points. Being a criminal has a faster leveling up reputation, but being a hero is more difficult yet rewarding since it takes a little bit more skill and awareness to level up as equally. With this installment, the choices of good and evil don't have much of an impact as the first game did, with certain points in the story having major impact on the player's personality and having a purpose at the end. I think this is where the developers most likely implemented this mechanic because it has established the brand, and the stylized title is implying famous or infamous. Without spoiling anything, in the other games, one was clearly the right choice at the end, but with this game, both choices, good or evil, made the character. Not that I'm saying that the character should have been good, even though it's encouraged. The game goes with whatever choice, and I think this makes it less impactful. Not much people talk about platformers, but this game, by my definition at least, is an action platformer. What many kid-friendly games tend to be, and this is in the same subgenre as most Super Mario games. Games like this have a new spin on platformers and don't really get the credit for it, and often will be compared to what I call action combat games, or first or third person shooters. Also, with the new COD Advanced Warfare, having a new game mechanic actually makes it a platformer as well. The point I'm trying to bring up is that the aesthetic distance in the game is closer than most games, allowing more vertical and open combat scenarios. That brings me to my next point, is that the game utilizes the environment well. Even though the main protagonist's power is controlling cement, the game really utilizes each matter in a complex way through the environment while making each power's attacks as deep as the player allows it to be. To an extent, the power system not being that complex, the environment limits the powers based on the matter, contrary to electricity being conducted by conductors. Fundamentally, the power system is basic on its own, and when this happens, it relies on the environment to be complex to add depth to each power, basically what a player can do with a single power. And having basic power system allows it to have an easy learning curve with a tendency to hard to master game mechanics, which is not the case here when it comes to weaponizing the matter, but when traversing and traveling, it becomes a little bit more complex based on the environment. This game is beautiful and doesn't highlight parts of the environment like most linear platformers, sometimes giving away solutions instead of teaching the player to understand what they can interact with just by the visuals alone. In conclusion, this game gets a C+. The aesthetic distance is amazing, but what brings down the game is the good and evil choices, because even though if the choices don't really make an impact, the players shouldn't really see that. And in the other game, like, you get to choose who lives, who dies. You get the character gets angry over the choices of being over the choices being forced on the player or on the character you're controlling. And here the choices don't really impact the player too much. They still react the same way. There's no impact, basically. It's just very neutral. It has no point. The good and evil system has no point in the game because it doesn't really do anything for the player. You are controlling. This by far does not mean it's a bad game, but when a game mechanic is in the game, it should either give the illusion it makes an impact or actually makes an impact, to changing personalities, to choosing to do something that the other characters in game expect the controlled character to do, as an example. This is my review of Infamous Second Son. TX3 out.